Hey there, action enthusiasts. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into an adrenaline-pumping recap of Run All Night, a cinematic thrill ride that hit screens in 2015. The movie begins with Jimmy Conlon lying on the ground, clutching his stomach after getting shot. Instead of his whole life flashing before his eyes, he reflects on his mistakes and regrets. In the distance, his son Mike is shouting and trying to avoid getting shot. 16 hours earlier, Jimmy was at a bar where he encountered Danny Maguire, the son of his old boss, involved in a shady deal with some unsavory characters. Jimmy needed $800 to fix his broken heater, and Danny agreed to give it to him if Jimmy dressed up as Santa Claus at his house, as the original Santa had canceled. Jimmy agreed reluctantly. Meanwhile, Mike works at a gym, where he mentors boys who don't have fathers. One of his best students is a boy named Legs. At home, Mike lives with his wife Gabriella, and their daughters, Caitlin and Lily. They are expecting their third child, and Gabriella is creating a collage to commemorate their family life before the new baby arrives. Mike comes across a photo of himself as a child with Jimmy, which makes him uncomfortable, so he covers it with a picture of his daughter. Danny meets with his father and some others to discuss selling a special kind of heroin, but his father refuses, upsetting Danny. The people who provided the heroin threaten to collect the money they gave Danny, even though Danny wants nothing to do with his old criminal life. This confuses him. Back to the present, Jimmy is playing Santa at Danny's house, but he's drunk and behaves inappropriately, even burning his hand by accident. He swears in front of the kids. Scene, who has been friends with Jimmy for a long time, joins him to cool off, and they share a cigarette. Jimmy used to work as an enforcer for Scene at a diner. Detective John Harding and his partner, Detective Torres, approach Jimmy. Harding knows about Jimmy's criminal history and his connection to Scene, who has corrupt cops on his side. Harding gives Jimmy his card, offering help or a way to confess his crimes if he ever needs it. Meanwhile, Mike, who also works as a limo driver, takes the people who want to sell heroin to Danny's house. While waiting outside, he sees Legs riding his bike alone and tells him to go home or he'll tell his mom. He offers Legs a ride, but inside the house, Danny jokingly gives the heroin sellers fake money from a Monopoly game, which angers them and leads to a fight. Danny shoots one of them, and the other escapes injured while Legs records the incident on video. Mike starts the car but Danny breaks the window, pulls him inside, and forces him into the house. When Legs leaves the car, a distraction allows Mike to hit Danny and fight with him and his friend. Mike manages to get away but leaves his wallet behind. He rushes home and calls Gabriella, who's with their daughters at her brother Ricky's house, urging her to stay put until he contacts her again. Suddenly, there's a loud pounding at the door, and it's Jimmy, who hasn't visited Mike's home since his wife's funeral. Jimmy steps outside for a smoke just as Danny enters the house. Mike spots Danny, who's pointing a gun at him, and a gunshot rings out. But it's Jimmy who fired the shot after shooting Danny in the neck. Mike applies pressure to the wound, but Danny doesn't make it. Jimmy departs, and Mike dials the police, claiming his father shot Danny in self-defense. Scene rushes to inform his wife, who responds by slapping Scene and falling apart. The corrupt cops who met Danny earlier arrive at Mike's house and identify Danny's body, leading to Mike's arrest. Jimmy pursues them through the streets and eventually rams their car into a store, freeing Mike and seizing one of the cops' guns. The surviving cop attempts to shoot them, but Jimmy intervenes, killing the cop himself. Several bystanders witness this, launching a manhunt for Mike and Jimmy. They make their way through the subway, constantly watching their backs. In a subway bathroom, Jimmy engages in a fight. Mike manages to get Jimmy onto the same train, despite Mike's desire to reunite with his family. Jimmy warns him that Scene will come after both of them and Mike's family to survive, and they must stick together for the night. Jimmy meets with Scene, hoping for forgiveness for what he did to Danny. However, Scene vows to eliminate Mike first before allowing Jimmy to meet his end. Two of Scene's henchmen go after Mike's family at Ricky's house, but after Mike's warning, they find nothing and leave the family unharmed. The Scene calls a hitman named Price to go after Mike and Jimmy. The two seek help from Legs at his apartment, and Mike discovers Legs' brothers there. He instructs Legs to assist them. A neighbor notices Mike and Jimmy, prompting her to call the police. As the cops arrive, Mike and Jimmy must formulate an escape plan. They cut the power to the building just as Price arrives, having killed a cop at the entrance. Equipped with night vision, Price pursues them through the dark stairways. He catches up to them as they start a fire in an apartment. Jimmy battles Price, and the building begins to burn. Jimmy burns Price's face and wrestles him to the ground, offering Mike the chance to shoot Price. However, Jimmy advises against it, and they flee as the police arrive. Price eliminates the officers, and the apartment explodes as Mike and Jimmy make their getaway. Jimmy brings Mike to his brother Eddie's house, where he admits to killing Sean's son. Eddie panics and demands that Jimmy leave. Eddie then informs Mike that Jimmy murdered their cousin, who was set to testify against Sean. Jimmy had previously told Mike that someone else was responsible for the cousin's death. Mike goes back to Ricky's place to retrieve Gabriella and the girls. Meanwhile, Jimmy decides it's time to resolve everything once and for all. He goes to the bar where Sean conducts his business and eliminates all the hitmen present. This leads to a confrontation between Jimmy and Sean in a train yard, with both exchanging gunfire. The Sean starts to flee, and Jimmy hesitates but eventually shoots him. The Sean, wounded in the side, attempts to keep moving but eventually collapses. Jimmy approaches Sean as he succumbs to his injuries. Legs visit the police station with the video evidence of Danny killing the Albanian mobster near his building. He also provides details about Mike and explains why Mike couldn't have committed these crimes. Jimmy reunites with Mike and his family at a lake house in North Shore. He finally gets to meet Gabriella and the girls, although Lily isn't particularly thrilled to see Jimmy. While Mike takes the family to the lake to feed ducks, Jimmy remains indoors and stumbles upon Gabriella's collage. Suddenly, Price, standing in the distance, shoots Jimmy in the side. Hearing the gunshots, Mike instructs Ricky to take the girls to safety. Armed with his own firearm, Mike engages in a firefight with Price in the woods. Jimmy manages to retrieve his rifle but is severely wounded and falls, aware that he's about to die. Summoning his last ounce of strength, he loads a bullet into the rifle and raises it just in time to shoot Price in the head before Price can harm Mike. Mike rushes to his father's side just before Jimmy passes away. Harding and his fellow officers arrive, and he reassures Mike that he knows Mike is innocent. Harding then examines Jimmy's hand and discovers a list of everyone Jimmy has ever killed. Later, Mike is at the gym, watching Legs win a fight against another kid, filling him with pride. Upon returning home, he finds Gabriella and the girls baking Christmas cookies. He enters his room and dresses in formal attire, presumably for Jimmy's funeral. Before departing, he takes one last look at the picture of him and Jimmy by the lake.